This time we're going to start our Industry Perspectives seminar, and this is actually really a panel discussion, an opportunity for us to learn from experts working in different industry components, what their take is on boxwood blight, how they manage and deal with boxwood blight, and get their perspective on the future of growing boxwood and using boxwood in the landscape. So I ask please if Mark Sellew, Robert Saunders, and Hugh Crump can join me on the stage, please. Yeah, please turn the lights on.
We didn't need the yeah.
And this is a little bit more informal. I think, I've got a series of questions that I've put together that I hope represent some of the concerns of the audience, but we'd also like to have people in the audience participate as we go forward. So Bennett is going to turn on the lights. If there are some in the back that want to slide their chairs forward, feel free to do so. We'll be a little casual to end off the day.
We don't know if we need the light on us.
Low light is good.
Low light is good. So there'll be no slides. It's all talking from here on out. So let me introduce our panelists for the day. And I will start with you, who is immediately to my left. So Hugh Crump is a registered landscape contractor, and he's a lifelong North Carolinian, which you'll probably find out as we move along. He began his career working in a large commercial landscape firm, and this is prior to him finding his true passion, his niche, working in a very small boutique-style residential arena when he founded a firm called Greenline Design. And if you've got your smartphone out, pull up the pictures because they're really quite stunning. So Greenline focuses on opulent design elements such as boxwood knot gardens, customized water features, and adaptive hardscaping. So Hugh has served the industry pretty extensively, both as a board member and a past president of the American Boxwood Society, and he currently serves on the board of directors for the North Carolina Nursery and Landscape Association.
Nice.
Our second panelist, you guys are out of order, is Mark Sellew, who owns and manages Pride's Corner Farms. This is a large wholesale grower located in Connecticut. So Mark is a graduate of Cornell University, class of 1978. Mark started Pride's Corner in 1980 with just a single greenhouse. Today, Pride's has 700 greenhouses and grows a wide selection of containerized perennials, nursery stock, roses, herbs, and trees on 600 acres. Within this nursery, boxwood is a major crop, and you say you have 200,000 container plants in place right now? Our third panelist is Mr. Robert Saunders, who joined his family's operation, the Saunders brothers, following his graduation from Virginia Tech with a degree in engineering. The Saunders brothers, as many of you know, began as a partnership between five brothers in 1915 in Piney River, Virginia. And today it's run by the third generation brothers, Tom, Bennett, Jim, Robert, alongside their dad, Paul. And they operate the wholesale nursery, an orchard, and a farm market. So their field and container nurseries cover about 250 acres, and they grow over 1,000 varieties of shrub, trees, and herbaceous plants, and 25 varieties of boxwood. And they're also testing approximately 100 other boxwood varieties. As I think most of you know, the Saunders brothers has become a leading authority on boxwood care, its culture, and research, focusing on finding new varieties that are tolerant or resistant to diseases and pests. So as you can see, we've got a highly expert panel, and I ask you all to welcome them. So we've asked everyone to stand. I think everybody has a microphone, so we can have a nice discussion going. But if things get a little tiresome, we've got the chairs off to the side. So I want to start off with a question to get everybody thinking about boxwood demand. So back in 2017, Tom Saunders, is that me or you guys? Okay, kill it. Okay, so in 2017, I think a lot of you probably saw this. Tom Saunders of the Saunders Brothers Nursery famously said of boxwood, "We threw a lot of product away in 2008. There was just no demand." Now think about this. Today the industry has a completely different problem. Demand is at an all-time high for boxwood, and growers are sometimes even having a difficulty filling some of the orders. And this is all in the face of the most destructive disease, I think, that anyone has ever seen in the boxwood arena. So my question is, why is this? And is the risk of blight a risk worth taking? And before I give you guys the floor, can I have a show of hands from the audience? Do you think the risk of blight is one worth taking in order to keep growing and propagating boxwood in the landscape? Can I have a show of hands? Yes, no, maybe?
It's America.
Did you all hear that? It'd be difficult to change careers now. Don't know any other way to make a living. Do we have any dissenters in the audience? Anyone who's going to throw in the towel? All right, so I'm going to pass the question on to the three of you, and perhaps Robert, you may want to give it a shot first.
Yeah, I think it certainly, according what Joanne said is very true. I don't know that I've ever seen the demand to be any higher than it is right now. However, the demand route is changing, and I often use the analogy. It's like trying to turn an aircraft carrier around. It takes a while, and so what we're seeing is demand is up, but demand is changing. So where Saffruticosa 25 years ago was far and away our number one plant, it's not there anymore. Where Justin Brower was 10 years ago was our number one plant. The tide is changing, so what's happening is we're having to turn it, and all these other varieties are jumping in and taking their place, and the demand is going up, and there's less, and the whole thing, we go back to 2008, there's less players in the game. So and we've weeded out probably a third of the nurseries, it's rough to say, are not here today that were here in 2006. So demand is up, and people are not going elsewhere. As soon as this thing hit in 2011, we said, is Alex going to be the next plant? What is going to be the next plant? And people have stood their ground and said it's going to be boxwood, and demand is just phenomenal right now. We can't fill the demand especially when we move into the varieties that are really showing promise with blight, with leaf miner, and great aesthetics too.
I would add to that I liked what the gentleman from Belgium said, that I agree that with all of Robert's comments, but I think the future is a little cloudier right now. I talked to a major garden center in Pennsylvania yesterday, a very good customer of ours, and he's not handling any boxwood in his stores next spring. He had such a difficult time with positive finds in his stores that it just, to him, became untenable to go forward. So that's the first time I've really ever heard that. And again, I would say, we have the nursery industry, of which I've been a part with a long time. We have to police ourselves better. And what annoys me greatly is so much Saffruticosa is still grown in Oregon mainly, shipped to the East Coast to infect all the other boxwood. I mean, that's a pretty strong statement, but and it's a little simple, but we have to be more careful. The reason this Pennsylvania garden center is out of the boxwood business, he had some Saffruticosa in from Oregon. He wanted a certain price point, and he got it real cheap, and look what happens in 3 years. He's out of the business. So we have to be much better. We have to go to resistant varieties, but there's still too many characters out there growing bad varieties and shipping them all over the place. So we have to be better.
You have a very different perspective, at least from the industry that you come from.
Yeah, my perspective is, sorry about that. My perspective is, can I trade my with you for a second? I'm off, yeah. My perspective is a little bit different because I deal with the end user most of the time that through historical things, historical properties, there's a certain aesthetic that clients demand and want that drives it for us. They're more concerned with simple issues. Like how to keep their dogs away from their boxwood, more so than something that is professionals that we worry about. And the one thing that I've mentioned before is cars are dangerous. They're sometimes even deadly. And with that, we still operate cars, but we do it with precaution. We try to follow all the rules. We try and do the very best practice. And the benefits of independent travel far outweigh the alternatives. So I apply the same process or thought process to Boxwood, and I feel like we're going to continue to use Boxwood. We're going to use it responsibly. We're going to try and make improvements where we can in the way that we prepare, using best practices with the people that we have install them, and take the precautions. And when the industry offers better products, we try to be on the cutting edge of offering those better products and mitigate risk where we can in the same way we do when we operate a car.
Mark, I'm going to start the next set of questions off with you. So what is different today in your world versus pre-2001 when Boxwood Blight showed up in the U.S., particularly with respect to production practices? And on a related topic, how do changes in regulations concern you or impact your production?
Well, I was one of those people who got a positive find at my nursery in 2011. And we threw away a lot of boxwood at Pride's Corner. It was a humbling and experience. So it forever changed how we grow it, how we handle it. The Saunders brothers have been great at sort of carrying the ship of being responsible growers and running a clean house, and I'm forever grateful to them. A lot of growers panicked about the market going south, and as you've all heard, it didn't happen. I remember a meeting at Mance, our big trade show, in January of 2012, and the place was packed, and all of us were in there panicking about, what happened to the #1 woody plant product that might just go away. Well, it didn't happen. But again, I just really worry about interstate commerce. Tennessee and Pennsylvania have some pretty tough regulations out there. We got to make sure that our ability to move the plants out of the state of Connecticut is very important to me. 80% of our sales are outside the state of Connecticut, so or interstate commerce is very important. Responsible grower practices. We have a big invasive plant issue. I work very closely with that. The plant they really should ban in America is Buxus fruticosa, in my view, and that would be that's the worst character or worst actor of any plant, I think, out there in commerce.
Robert, same question?
With regard to production practices, we've certainly had to make some major changes, and I think many of you have read about them, but we are much more careful about what comes into our nursery. We've actually stopped any boxwood, new boxwood coming in. And to kind of back up, the blessing in this whole thing is we recognized the issue of boxwood leaf miner, and in the mid-2000s, we brought in as many different plants as we possibly can. Thus, in 2011, when the door slammed shut we already had about 125 varieties on the ground, so we could start testing for boxwood blight with what we had at that point. But we are taking major precautions to keep from moving the disease, and inevitably, we believe we will get the disease. But we want to keep it from moving from place to place within our nursery, so we quadrant the nursery up into different, but because we have 5 or 6 different zones, and we do cleaning practices between those to keep from moving it. So it's costing us more money to grow boxwood today than it cost us before. With all the practices, with wearing Tyvek to walk in, I'll put on a Tyvek pants when I walk in a boxwood greenhouse now, and what we're doing, everything is costing us more to do it, but we think in the long term it's going to be worth it.
I guess I have been affected in a lesser way than people on the grower side. But if any of you were here when we had our last boxwood practice event that we had here, I don't remember the exact name of the last event we had here, searching for the name, can't think of it. But at that time, the industry had a little bit of panic. One of the things that one of the speakers mentioned were alternatives for boxwood, where the ilex came up. And in my career since 2011, we've used it one time in a site that the customer had Saffruticosa surrounding a intimate small garden spot that had a perfect center area in it. And they came to me, and I had identified that they had boxwood blight. And just being a consumer and trying to inform them, when he goes, look, is this it? Putting his hands on it, and I said, please do not touch anything else. and he was just, did not understand the effect that it had on me. And so he goes, well, can we do something, a different type of boxwood instead of Saffruticosa? But since the proximity of the Saffruticosa that we had removed the majority of, they insisted that we leave what had not been infected at that point, was as far away as from me to Robert. So I said, there is not another boxwood that I would plant in this location. So in the one occasion, we've used ilex to put in a knot garden that they insisted on, and the way we navigated the situation was to use ilex in that one situation, but otherwise, we've continued to use boxwood in the same manner.
I have a follow-up question for you, because you are the unique individual on the stage. You're a landscape professional, and you have the power to make recommendations in introducing and building new landscapes that will or will not include boxwood. As you move forward in developing a design for your customers, what sort of practices do you undertake to make sure that you're not bringing any boxwood blight onto their property, one way or another? And are there particular things you do in the build process and how you design the landscape to minimize boxwood blight? For example, do you change the irrigation settings? Do you change the layouts? Are any of these things part of your daily work?
What we've done for a number of years related to the irrigation is we do try and use drip irrigation for a multitude of different reasons, water conservation, and as far as, and also no overhead watering of the plants. We just don't feel like that is beneficial for the plants. And also, if you ever are in a town that has water restrictions, in some of the lighter phases of water restrictions, they still do allow drip irrigation. So that is a practice that we practice always. As far as the plant selection, we just try to keep ourselves updated and work within what's best available to achieve the scale and the size that we need. As far as plant varieties, the challenge I think in the industry right now is sempervirens are still available in the large sizes. So if you want a 5x5 wintergreen boxwood, that's a very, very difficult thing, and sometimes properties demand that size and scale. In those situations, sempervirens are available in that size, and it's interesting how the plant cycles go, where if a 36-inch boxwood is in high demand, they're almost impossible to find for a year, and then the following year 42s will be hard to find, and then usually when the 36s are all gone, people will migrate to a 30 or 32 inch, and it really depletes the availability overall. So that is the biggest driver for us is availability and first choice versus alternatives.
I have a related question for all three of you. We've heard a lot of research today. We've heard a lot of practical advice today on the extraordinary lengths that producers and landscapers undertake to keep boxwood blight from becoming a reality in their nursery stock. But we all know that out there in the world, there's plenty of boxwood being moved around that are not produced under the same sort of gold standard conditions that you might like to see. We know that people are going out Saturday morning to the big box store and they're buying a boxwood and they're sticking it in the foundation of their plant. I know that there are costs associated with what you do. Is there any way that you, as responsible growers and producers and purveyors of quality boxwood, draw attention to the fact that you have these value-added products? Or does the industry have any manner in designating these plants as high value?
Mr. Boxwood, I would say that there's a great opportunity in our industry right now in that regard. We need to get around better varieties and be able to tell that story in a compelling manner to the marketplace and to the consumers. It's really not there right now. It's a muddled, we're still growing a lot of green velvet and green mountain, and those are great varieties, but we know that they're moderately susceptible. So if this continues to expand as in the environment, we're going to have varieties that could possibly be not sustainable going forward. So that's a very important thing that we're working on. I mean, I'm fortunate with Saunders Brothers, Pride's Corner, and 3 other nurseries, Sheridan, who's here, Over to Vesta, and Willoway. We've worked together and formed a company called Synergy to try to go out there and get new varieties and work together to get the best new plants. And that's one of the things we're working on, is to get better varieties of boxwood.
And I would add on to it, we are doing all we can to educate. Although us trying to, as small a company as we are, trying to educate the greater public is kind of like dipping the ocean with a teaspoon, we think at times. Yeah. But we are doing anything we can. We're offering as much data as we can to the consumer. And a lot of the consumers really like to know the story. And the more we can share those stories, the better. But we are fighting, and Mark, you alluded to it earlier, we're fighting the low-cost points so often, for those people who don't know, and then they're coming in and ruining the bigger picture for a lot of us.
Yeah.
The thing that comes to mind, is there some way of marketing it or certifying it? These plants have been subjected to
Absolutely.
the best management practices, have
You're
some
talking
sort
the
of,
future right there.
yeah,
Yeah.
having some sort of
Yeah.
designation or name, and certainly people are willing to spend more for petunias because they're a special
Yeah,
variety.
I think and that's where it's got to happen, is we've got to have some sort of a mark on those plants. And that's the thing we're trying to do as a small group, but even from HRI and whoever else can, and if we can get to the point where there is a rating system where we can mark these things down, and we know that this group of plants has got a pretty good chance of standing up, and we've got to think, though, beyond boxwood blight. We've got multiple things that we need to be looking at, but certainly boxwood blight, if there is some sort of a certification process that can rank these guys, and people realize where those dogs are and we kick them out.
Hugh, do you have comments on this?
I think the one thing that they've both touched on is just certification, and I think there have been from different states certifications that really are just a kind of handshake agreement that you're going to do your best to avoid problems and use best practices, and I just don't think that takes it to the level that we're going to need to be sustainable.
So I have a question then for the audience, particularly those that are involved in selling or trading boxwood. Will your customers pay more if they have a product that has some sort of value-added tag? You know, people are willing to spend more for organic produce, that they can immediately see that there are benefits to spending a little bit of extra money for that. Yeah, can I have a show of hands?
We already sell Saunders boxes for more money than other growing boxes. No offense, but they cost more for us. So, again, people pay more for a Saunders box. I think there's some that do and some that don't. Some of them are selling low price
Yeah, and I mean, that brings me to my next question. You know, with any topic nowadays, you can find all kinds of information on the internet, some of it good, some of it bad, some of it's reliable, some of it maybe not so much, maybe not factual, maybe not timely, maybe was good a couple years ago. And I'll start off with you this time. Where do you go for recommendations and news about boxwood blight, and what recommendations would you make to the audience in seeking out that sort of information?
The one thing that I do is through networking and by having friendship with Saunders Brothers and the literature that they put out that, quite frankly, I think maybe I'm the only one in the room, but I use their literature to inform my customers, to educate them, and I think the resources that are out there from industry leaders, I don't put a lot of stock in sources on the internet for most things related to the industry that I work in. I depend on trusted people in the business that I have a historical respect for that goes a lot further for me.
It's very simple. I have the same answer. I go to Saunders Brothers. I go to Robert, Little Missy, Green Beauty. I mean, I'm going to buy some gallons from Robert and Sonia because we stopped growing Green Beauty, but with Robert has said it's got a high degree of boxwood blight resistance, so we're changing our lineup with the help of Saunders Brothers.
Robert, any comments?
Yeah, who are you going to?
I guess you can't say come to Saunders.
That's right. You know, to us, it's going back to the data, and it's watching what's going on and listening. And you know, it was really sad the other day. I was talking to a significant landscaper, and his comment, he said, "Well, what are you doing this week?" And I said, "Well, I'm going up to Boxwood meeting in Beltsville. What are they going to talk about?" I said, "Boxwood blight." And he said, "Oh, is that still around?" And you know, and if he could have seen me, my jaw probably went to the floor at that point. But unfortunately, there's people who, if it's not knocking on their door, they don't pay any attention to it. But there are so many people that are out there looking at it and understanding it and working in it every day, and just getting in the networks and going to meetings like this and talking to people, just like you said. We're just trying to stay connected to people all the time because we want our data to be challenged too as much as anybody's. And we want to throw that data out to as many people as we can, because if we educate, we plant the right plants, and the gardens succeed, we all succeed in it. No matter whether it's a boxwood or it's a Nepeta or whatever it is that's going in there.
Do you have a feeling from landscapers and garden centers of what their perspective is on the future of boxwood?
they don't have much of a perspective, to be honest with you. You know, there's a little bit of a zip code. You know, they're not. Very few of them look beyond the bigger picture. You know, if they have a positive find, which someone said are mainly happening at the landscape distributors or wholesalers, but they're looking to us, their suppliers, to really for the best varieties and the best advice.
We've said the ilex word about a dozen times since we started this discussion, but that, you know, that is an important point in facing this disease, and if things become really bad at some point, we may need to seriously consider boxwood alternatives. What are your perspectives on that? What sort of plants do you think might take on that, might serve to fill that role?
Robert told me in a discussion before that that is not an option. Seriously, that is just something that, you know, from a landscape design or landscape install perspective, you got to understand that landscapers don't have the inventory or the investment in boxwood. They are kind of here today, gone tomorrow. It's the growers that have the investment, that have hundreds of thousands of plants in the ground and in production that represent millions of dollars, that if things went completely sideways with boxwoods and it was the end of the road for boxwood, these are the guys that have the investment in it, and the landscapers can transition to something else if Armageddon would happen. Me personally, I can't see that day. I don't have that many more years left in my career, so I will, you know, standing here today, I cannot imagine a day where that we don't use landscape, and I would go as far as to say we use boxwood on 90% of all jobs that we install, period, unless they are a commercial project. Otherwise, there is boxwood on the project.
Just one comment on kind of down that same road. We're boxwood, but boxwood is only about $3 and $10 that come into the business. So we're growing ilex, and since 2011, ilex sales have gone down and boxwood sales have gone up. We immediately tried in 2011 to try Distillium and several other plants. You know, everybody said Distillium, oh, they can replace boxwood. And the winters of 2013 and 2014 corrected that one really fast, with multiple, many dead of those. The year before boxwood blight hit, we tried Sarcococa, and we figured out how to grow Sarcococa, and then boxwood blight hit, and so we had to pick between Sarcococa and boxwood. So, we offer the alternatives, but the consumer and the landscaper and the wholesale and the retailer are not asking for the alternative. They want boxwood still. They want us to get out in front, understand the plant, understand what's going on with blight, with leaf miner, with anything that's going on with it, figure it out and provide to them. They want the easy thing. They just want us to provide the right plant.
Would you guys agree with that? Anybody have any solutions to want a different plant?
I just have to say, up north in Connecticut, inkberry is a pretty popular plant, but from just my own perspective, you look at an inkberry in 5 to 10 years, it doesn't look nearly as good as a boxwood. So it's a good plant, but it's not as good as a boxwood.
Did you have a question, Didier?
I don't know why I took that. I realized I got my own microphone.
In Europe, it's a little bit different, I think. But ilex is there at this moment the most popular plant because we have the caterpillar. So I think we should aware what is going on. Now, ilex is a fine plant, but it cannot replace buxus. And there's a historical garden in Holland, Paleis Tuin het Loo. They changed all the historical buxus, thrown it away, and they planted 27 kilometers of ilex. 2 years later, They have to replace 6 kilometers of Alex boarding again. Dus it's not a perfect plant. It cannot grow where Buxus grow, but we should be aware that it can change. I hope the caterpillar will not come to America. It can change.
Joey, can I ask a question back to Didier on it?
Absolutely, because
And you made the mention earlier, and when I was in Europe about 3 years ago, Sempervirens is number one, far and away, probably 95% of production. The U.S. is maybe further ahead in these other varieties than...
Yeah, that's one of the advantages in the States here, denk. You have a lot of varieties you can use, and that is a solution. You can, I think Sulfuriticosa, it's not good. You have to stop with that. I think.
Are the Europeans switching to more of these new varieties, or they going to stay with Semper?
No, they all turn to Alex. At this moment, Alex, Osmanthus, Prunus lusitanica, all plants that stay green in winter, but we have not so strong winters like here, I think. It can change, and within 10 years, it can change a lot.
So don't sit down, because I have a final question, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience. But Didier, I'd also like to get your perspective, and it's a simple one. What do you see the world of Boxwood looking like in 10 years, in 20 years down the road? And you give us a unique perspective. So I'll start with you.
I think using other varieties, but for sure the resistant hybrids, but that will be the solution, I think, for the disease, for the box blight. When there's caterpillar here, we have to treat, and that's another issue. Maybe that's for within 4 years for the next meeting, but the people will still buy boxwood also in Europe, but it will be more exclusive. 40 years ago, in Europe, no one had Buxus, only the historical gardens and people with a lot of money. But in normal gardens, there was no boxwood 40 years ago. Dus it can change. But I think within 10 years, people still buying boxwood, but more exclusive, not in every garden. But there is more production in Europe. We have always too many production in Europe. You cannot follow the orders, but in our area there are too much plants, and the prices go down. Thank
you. You, same question. Where do you see the world of boxwood in 10, 20 years from now? I'm just going to go right down the row.
I hope we continue to make progress with new plant types that are more resistant to all pests and disease. I think that's the solution, and I think that's a big reason that we should all support research. However we can best do that, through volunteerism, through our money, through any number of ways. I think research and development of better plants that are resistant is the solution, and hope that we don't run out of runway before we get to that point.
I agree completely with what Hugh said. Innovation, new varieties, and responsible grower practices. You know, we spread pestilence. I've been a grower for a long time. In the name of commerce, we have to be bigger than that and look at this market, preserve the vitality of the boxwood market, and be smart about what we're doing.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything all three have said before. Just understanding what's going on and moving. Certainly the mix is going to be different 10 years, 20 years from now. Hopefully, again, back to the analogy, our boat will hopefully be turned a little more. And with responsible growers growing the right plants, you know, and then the other side, and I heard a really neat talk the other day about us getting the plants to where the consumers are buying, getting the right plants to where they're buying, and so that they can buy those plants. And getting educated and getting out there with, again, to the person who's buying it, to where they're buying. Because the whole world of buying with Amazon and everything is changing. So what will that look like in 10 or 20 years? And that's a whole nother conference for another day.
You can buy your boxwood in the same box as you buy your food.
Yes.
Yeah, on the ship at the same time. Well, I want to thank you all. I'm
think
going
there
to
was a
open up
question back there.
the floor to questions, and if you wouldn't mind, if you can save your questions until I can come down and give you a microphone so everybody can hear. So was there a question somewhere? I'll walk up. All right, I'm going to walk over there. And while I do, I want to ask a question of Margaret Pooler. I missed the part of your seminar, but I know a lot of people are really interested in this poster over here. Is there a gift shop where they can purchase it?
Auction.
It's not so much a question as a comment of what you guys are talking about the Ilex word and replacing boxwood. There will be boxwood replaced with Ilex, I think, for sure, because it is a nice green plant that can be pruned into shapes that people want and desire. However, it doesn't grow in the shade. It's a high nitrogen requiring plant. It does not, it's not deer resistant. There are so many things that are against holly where boxwood are far superior that it's very difficult to overcome those changes and challenges. And so I think the key is definitely going to be resistant varieties. And I think that's where we really, as our society and country wants to get away from chemicals, as I do, as a parent, as a steward of the earth, less chemicals is always an option that I'm looking for. So anytime we can genetically improve plants, and I'm not necessarily for GMOs, but I mean, that could be a solution possibly. But through the breeding, I think is going to be the ultimate answer is resistant varieties, I think, because boxwood is, as we all know, a wonderful plant, and it really is irreplaceable.
Well said.
There's a lot of rumors, and fortunately, we haven't been pegged for having blight on any of our either of our two nurseries. But I just wanted to know your thoughts on some of the ramifications, maybe life during and after finding boxwood blight on your nursery, what it's like, the process, and what happens after.
God, you don't want it on your worst enemy.
I know. Well, that's that's
Yeah.
part of the what we're worried about.
Yeah.
'Cause
I
for-
advocate to all our customers that if you want to continue to buy plants from Oregon, I call them the Chinese of the nursery industry. They're all clean, but they're not clean, and make sure you segregate those plants if you choose to buy those varieties that are very susceptible. I had a burial. I had to have every plant buried, and it was in the regulators in Connecticut watched it the whole process. So it was very expensive. It was very stressful, and you just got to be more responsible. I became a lot more responsible. I had to make a big mistake to do that, but I was growing some fruticosa in 2011. I wouldn't grow that if I could sell each plant for $10,000 a piece right now.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing, Mark. We can sell a lot of these varieties that are susceptible. However, we're making production decisions to grow the ones that are tolerant and are better plants, and hopefully convincing the people who buy from us, we're in a better world, go this way, it isn't as good a plant. So it's a hard money decision to turn down your number one selling plant, number one selling variety. You're cutting production of it in lieu of something you think you can sell because you think it's better. Well, you know it's better, but I got to convince you because you're going to buy it.
Yeah.
That it's better. And that's
And
the
Justin
scary
Browers
part.
is what you're doing right now.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Browers.
Justin Browers was our number one, that was the number one plant at the top of all of our sales. And we've cut it drastically because I think it's still a great plant in my yard. However, I think there's other plants that can replace it. But the time will tell if I've convinced the world. We've been looking at a plant for 10 years to replace it. So we think we've got it.